Case, welcome to the podcast, buddy.
Thanks. I'm so honored and happy to be here.
Yeah, it's good to see you. I would be doing this in person, but I'm actually talking to you from my parents' house in New Mexico, and the background behind me is fake. It's a shot of actually, we just before we started talking, we were talking about my brother from another podcast, Lid Shaw. My background is actually Lid Shaw's brother's little patio in Brooklyn
Yeah,
behind
I
me.
lived in Brooklyn a long time. It definitely looks like the Brooklyn backyard, so my instincts were correct.
Yeah, your instincts are spot on. So, anyways, a little shout out to those guys.
Hell yeah.
Um, well, let's get started. Lately, I've been doing this kind of state of the state concept where you just tell everybody that's tuning in fresh who you are, where you're at, what you consider yourself, where are you currently working out of, and then we'll get into the background part of it. So, tell us all that stuff.
Yeah. Case Newcomb here. I'm based in San Francisco, audio engineer and producer. I've got my first big start at Hyde Street Studios. I'm on staff in A. Since then, I've worked really hard to break in with all the other major studios in town. So I have a relationship with Different Fur, 25th Street, of course. I love working out of there. And then we have another studio in Brisbane called Lucky Recording. That place is great. It's like a hot rod shop, just a bunch of maniacs in an old 71 2824 API. Great place to make rock records and stuff like that. And then I have a little spot at a local like rehearsal space that also has studios down the street at Secret Studios where we do pure in the box mixing, but we have a nice vocal signal chain, so we can do vocal overdubs there, and we can do like guitar amp overdubs, stuff like that. Like we have mic drums in there if they want it, but it's such a small room. I don't know why we would ever mic drums. And then where I'm at in my career. So when I first started 4 years ago, I was doing a hybrid of interning at High Street Studios and doing a lot of live sound, and then trying to work towards just doing studio producing and engineering full time. So this year I made a full time commitment to step away from live sound and focus more on that. Or last year, sorry, 2024. So I've been working with local bands, helping develop artists and producing them. So I basically record, produce the sessions, mix them, and I send them off to get mastered. So the goal is to kind of build up my career alongside of these younger artists as they build their careers, especially since I'm the new guy in the scene relatively. Like a lot of people in town have been doing this for 20 plus years or are way ahead of me.
Mm-hmm.
So the way I see it is to kind of build it up. I've been building it from the ground up. So we had some good records that we've been working on in 2024. I'm working on another record right now. Those things are just starting to roll out here now in 2025. So aspiring to grow to the next level. Hopefully one of these bands will make it through the first stages, get on the road, and get some notice, and then we'll be able to move forward and grow from there together.
Where did you grow up?
I had a father that didn't like to be in one place for more than 4 years, so I moved all over the place. So I was born in the desert north of LA, so it's a little bit of a long answer. So all my first memories are like San Dimas, Long Beach, early memories of Disneyland, Southern California. My mom was from Newport Beach, but my dad's side of the family is all from New York and New York State. When I was about 4, we moved to the Berkshires of Massachusetts. It was amazing. They had summer stock, so there was all these it's a beautiful place, and then all these like celebrities would come in for summer stock. So it's an interesting. You were in a small town, USA, but there was also all this great top level art coming through. So it's interesting to just kind of have some osmosis. Like, I believe that's the word. We kind of absorb some of that at a young age. Then my parents split. My mom went to Phoenix, Arizona. My dad went to Orange, California, and I kind of went back and forth. And then I did 10 years in Vegas, and then moved to New York, and now I'm in San Francisco.
How did audio enter your life? What was the first recognition of your or awareness of audio and your when you started to pay attention to it?
My late cousin, Mike Kissel, owned a studio in Midtown Manhattan, right across from the Brill Building, and then eventually in the Brill Building called KMA Recording. We did the New York recording studio producing scene for decades and decades. So when I was getting more and more ambitious in my mid-20s as a player, my cousin Mike said, "Hey, you gotta, when you're in the studio, you need to learn everything you can about the studio." And I was like, "What?" He's like, "Dude, all the big cats can run the consoles. They understand all that stuff." So the next session I got for one of my little local punk band I was in called Never Ready at the time, we got into like a really nice big studio to do our, I forget, we were cutting some singles. Guy had a big 48 channel, I forget what console, but so I started asking him, I was like, "Hey man, how does the mic on my guitar get to that tape machine, and then how does it get from the tape machine to these speakers?" So he walked me through the one channel signal chain from start to finish. When people are intimidated by a console, you're like, "Hey, all you got to learn is one to get started, and then there's just 47 more of them. So don't like let's just learn one channel, and then I'll teach you like that. It just repeats everywhere." So that was kind of like my first awareness of that. And I had no awareness of live sound though, even though when I was playing in bands, I don't even remember, other than doing sound check, even having any awareness of what was going on in live sound. And then I got a little home studio. I was on Cubase back then, and I had like an old school Motu 828 MK2, nice rack, like, just a couple preamps and a lot of line in. And I was just kind of poking around in there, making my own stuff. Then I moved to New York, and I was able to set up a little like studio in our we had a 2-level spot in Brooklyn, so downstairs it was cool. We lived in like a heavy Latino and Hasidic Jewish neighborhood on the south side of Williamsburg, so you could play all day, nobody cared. And I just read an audiobook. I think Men at Work put it out. My uncle gave it to me. He said, "Hey, you should check this out." And then I just put the mics where it said to on the books. I'd bought a compressor and EQ. I had no idea how to work any of this stuff, but I figured it out. I got like a little Behringer mixing console and just used those preamps. And somehow I didn't know what plus 4dB or any of that stuff was, but I knew that I needed preamps, and then I could plug those into the Motu, and then I could record drums and guitars. And I just did what the book said. And I have a buddy who's a very, very well-known photographer and CGI guy now. His name's Dale May, and he had this rock band called Satanicide on the East Coast, kind of like the Spinal Tap. They were great, all these guys, but top tier, like Photoshop professional. He's one of these most talented guys I know. Great singer, great player, everything. So we recorded this thing, and then he's like, "How did you get those drums to sound so good?" I say this with humility. I'm not trying to like flex, but I was like, "I don't know. I just read the book. I put the mics I just pointed them in the direction, and I just turned up the things." But that was like one of the first signs that I kind of like had a knack for it, kind of an intuitive understanding of what was going on with audio. So that was some of my first experiences with recording, and to be a long time before I actually aspired to do it professionally.
What was your instrument in the bands you were playing in?
Guitar.
Okay.
I was an aspiring rock shredder, and I was really into old blues.
Okay, so were you in school band at all or not?
That's a great question. So the lazy slacker I was as a kid, I showed up for orchestra, and I was like, "I want to play saxophone. That's a cool instrument." They're like, "Well, we got trombone and like something else." So I was like, trombone, which was kind of lucky because it's a very intuitive instrument. 7 positions, 3 lip positions. Like, that's not too hard for somebody to understand at a young age. And it turned out I really had a knack for it in a great ear. So they sent me to Allstate when I was in like 6th grade with all the high school kids. So that was nice, kind of like, oh, I do have an ear for this, an instinct, looking back. And then I got turned on to guitar through 80s rock and roll. And I was like, oh, yes. I think I saw Paradise City or some Guns N' Roses really kicked me into like, I want to be a musician. I ate that sex, drugs, rock and roll. That dream that they were selling, I ate that up like candy. So I just, that sent me in a whole different direction with music.
Yeah. I could see how the Paradise City video would inspire one to want to play rock music.
When I saw Slash out there at Soundcheck, and then when the Meadowlands filled up, and then they were playing that, and then they go to, I think, Wembley, I was like, that's what I want to do. I want to be in front of thousands and thousands of people playing guitar.
Do you have brothers or sisters?
I do have a little sister. She's in Phoenix. Couple niece and nephew.
I'm curious about how the early part of your life, divorced parents, moving around a lot, kind of shifting and learning how to kind of step into a new situation, how that affected you and really honed your skill because I've observed it you stepping into the world of the Bay Area audio scene effortlessly from how it appears from my side. And I'm curious if that moving around played a little bit of a role in your ability to do that.
I don't think so. It was ended up being more of a detriment, I think, because I was already very stunted with my emotional maturity. I was very hyper, had no sense of like group awareness, really great one-on-one with people, and no sense of like group social dynamics. And then by moving around a lot, I was always like the new kid getting picked on. And I was going to get picked on anyways because of just how I was wired as a kid and my lack of social understanding. I think what really got me going originally is I bartended for a long time. And so through that process of bartending and making a lot of social mistakes through bartending, I started to learn how to navigate people. Usually more with when I said something wrong and getting a negative response. I'm like, oh, how can I not repeat that situation? And I bartended first in Las Vegas. So obviously a very super international community. So I started to get a lot of exposure to international people that I hadn't been. So I started to just slowly get an awareness of how to interact with all types of people with a little bit of tact. And then I went to New York, and it was like even more so. I was bartending in New York for a long time. I was always really able to intuitively and naturally to connect with people really genuinely. And and inspire a lot of trust in people almost immediately, which I think still baffles me to this day, why people respond so well to me. But I think what really, really gave me the edge and understanding was when I finally switched from bartending when it was self-centered. For my experience, as I always was kind of like the egoist, unfortunately. So it's about me, like, look how good I'm doing. Yeah, look how much money I'm making. Where it would have been much more of a successful interaction had I focused more on like the needs of the customers. Although I was great at it, like I make you feel good and all that stuff, but it was always still kind of like a little bit selfishly motivated in my internal world, a little too much ego. But when I started managing other people and had to create successful teams and complex social hierarchies, when managing large staffs and dealing with, I was working at rock venues or just music venues and music festivals. So a lot of pieces are moving around. There's a lot of people dealing with promoters and managers and vendors and employees. And it was just very complicated social dynamics. But in order to be a success in that role, I had to completely step outside of myself. So I had to zoom out and get this holistic awareness of everybody, and then constantly have this focus of how do I get the most positive result of all time, as much as possible with every interaction I was doing. So through the nature of that, I kind of really developed emotionally and also socially in terms of group awareness. So that was actually the big shift, which came much, much later in life. And not to get too long-winded about it, but what I'd learned during those periods of time, I realized had I had that kind of social awareness and emotional maturity when I was a kid, I would have been much more successful in a band. What always held me up in the band environment was being the ego, self-centered guy and not understanding the group dynamics. I think moving around a lot, never really, really settling into something long-term with people, and then slowly understanding the group hierarchies and dynamics was worked against me as a kid. And it took me a long time to learn how to interact with others in a selfless team, team focus on a group collective goal. And that's been the big key to my success in interacting with others in the studio as well.
There's a term I like to use. It's a drug dealer reference, that when people are just so not paying attention, not reading the room, not paying attention to other people and focusing, as you say, like, well, it's all about me. The term that I like to use is they're getting high on their own supply.
Yeah, that was bartending for me. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I've had to call. I have some friends that I've had in the past. I've had to kind of call out and just say, "Hey, I see what you're doing here. It's cool, but don't get high in your own supply. Keep a level head. Focus on others." your bartending experience, such a vast, many slices of life and personalities coming through, and what training that bartending can be in dealing with, new people.
Unbelievable amount of training. I remember 6 months into when I was really starting to work as an engineer in the studio. I was like, whoa, I've been preparing for this my whole life. Like, customer service is like just like number one in the studio. And like, how much, if you have a service industry background and you're like, it's intuitive to put out a glass of water for the vocalist and keep things really tidy and organized and be proactive in communication, making people feel comfortable. Like you said, reading the room and knowing when to add levity to the environment or just shut your mouth. Um, and especially with the operations management stuff of running bars, it gives you a lot of experience and insight when you're dealing with like the business side of it, email communication, financial stuff, producing, like pre-planning of like the staging of the album, how the flow of the day is going to go, intercommunication with all the people involved on the project. It does give you a high edge because people in the game, because people are experienced that extra level of like customer service that you've become like really good at in another field. And it's like that kind of like extra special thing that not everybody completely gets. Now, obviously the best engineers and the best producers and the best studios around get that. And there's a reason those people keep getting work, because they take that part of it very seriously. So I'm not special in any means. It would just help prepare me for something that I would otherwise would have been probably a steeper learning curve.
When did you come to the conclusion that audio was something that you wanted to do professionally?
It was COVID, and I had nothing to do. And I got the city college. We have Free City here in San Francisco, as you well know. So if you're a San Francisco resident, you can go to community college for free, mostly free. And I looked through the entire course catalog, and the only thing I was drawn to was the recording studio. And my partner at the time, was like, "Are you serious? Like, that's what you want to do?" I was like, "Yeah." Unbeknownst to me, she was secretly rooting for me to get into music professionally. So I think it was about 6 months into the program, I got into the mixing class, and it took me about 2 weeks to get a mix together. But when I got that first real mix together, where I could feel it in my body, like it satisfied me.
Mm-hmm.
I was hooked. I was like, this is it. This is what I want to do. I want to be a part of this and do this professionally. So yeah, getting that first mix together after I had some training at City College was the aha moment.
Was that Dana that was training you?
Yeah, Dana J.
Dana J.
Bema, City College. What? Mama Sounds. Yeah. She's great.
For you audience, I'll put a link in the show notes to my interview with Dana. Dana's a long-term friend of mine that I've known for, God, I don't remember how long I've known her, quite a long time. And she is quite a centerpiece of knowledge and really bringing up another generation after generation of audio pro.
Absolutely. You couldn't oversell her enough. She's an absolute institution for the cultivation of local audio interest and talent, and then helping enable that group beyond the program and creating contacts. All my first gigs came through Dana. I was so hungry, and I said yes to every email, yes to every invite. Yeah.
Obviously, you think very highly of her, so I would only assume that your experience with her was inspirational and helped feed this desire for audio.
Oh, without a doubt. It was like the perfect situation for me to kind of, I chose it, but fall into, I think it was like within halfway through the first class, I was like, I'm going to hitch my wagon to this train. Like, this Dana lady knows what's up. And she has like an enthusiasm and a passion and a spark. She's really good at talking and explaining things. And she's tough and direct, which I love that. I mean, that's my whole East Coast family. It's like that old school New York, New Jersey folks. So I like that direct, kind of tough, focused energy, and very loving and supportive. And we'll open her whole network to you if you earn her trust and do all the work, and so yeah, and she'll you can always check in with her, and then she'll just constantly to this day help you out.
But just to clarify, you had some audio experience leading up to this. It wasn't like you just jumped into Dana's class and started from square one going, what is a microphone? You were past that.
Yeah, I was way past that in the sense of I'd been a recording artist for a long time. Been throughout my 20s and early 30s, been in the studio as a guitar player quite a bit. And then I had that studio experience of building my own studio. That was about the time, as like that home recording started to become pretty accessible. But I had no idea what I was doing. Like, I didn't know what an EQ was, really. I didn't know what a compressor was. I had no idea what gain staging was. I was just like blindly turning knobs and just using my ear. So I had an awareness of it somewhat, yeah, and being in the studio. So that gave me a really big leg up in my initial understanding and of absorbing the concepts.
How old were you when you started that program?
45, I think. 44 or 45, something like that. Second career, complete shift, yeah.
Yeah. How did you feel coming in at that age?
I could have cared less. I was so excited. I did not want anything to do with school and education when I was a kid. And this was my first time I had any kind of structured formal education outside of like guitar lessons. Almost in my entire life since I was about 17, kind of wrapped up school, high school. And I was just absolutely in love with education and being educated and the whole experience. And I was front row center. It was on Zoom, but front row, asking all the questions, completely engaged in everything. And I didn't even take my age into account. I was just so focused on what I wanted to do and the excitement of doing it all. I was like, screw it. It was more in hindsight, like after I started, like looking backwards when I got into the industry, how funny that was, like starting at Hyde Street Studios as an intern, where a 6-year-old intern, 45, whatever I was, 44, 45. Looking back, I was like, man, all the other interns are like in their early 20s for the most part, young kids coming out of school or still in school, audio careers. And then I'm like, oh, these people must have just thought I was insane. This older guy coming in, like, but I wasn't playing around, and everybody knew it, and everybody figured it out. But that's when I kind of became a little bit more aware of my age.
Well, you're aging well, because I had no idea you were even in your 40s.
Hooray. Thank you.
Yeah. So you got that going for you. You had me fooled. It's interesting. I've interviewed a number of people who have come into audio later in life, and the focus is the common denominator amongst all of you that I've talked to. Because when I don't know if you'd agree with me or not, but I think that when we're older, we've grown, we've gone to a point where we're like, okay, it's time to quit fucking around. I now know what I want to do, and I'm going to focus on it. And when the student is ready, the master will appear, or the teacher will appear, as they say. And there was Dana bringing the knowledge to you, and here you were at that age, just probably thrilled to be there.
Oh, over the moon, ecstatic. I loved everything about it. I read everything, watched every video. Yeah.
So in that moment, and as you were learning, did you start to formulate and strategize? Okay, here's what I'm going to do. Obviously, it's a work in progress. I'm not trying to insinuate that you had a full-scale plan together, but you started to piece things together and be a little more organized probably than the average, early 20-something.
Absolutely. And also as an adjunct, I think is the word, to all the audio stuff that you do to get the certifications for live sound and studio recording. You need to go through the internship program at City College. And through that process, you do a 5-year plan. So you set specific, the specific measurable goals. And that, what do I want to do by year 1, year 2? I've hit almost all those targets. So that through that extra step that they give you in City College, it gets you thinking about, all right, how can I do this for real? Where do I want to be? And then you got to walk through all that. And then you got to interview a couple of people that are in the industry and learn more about what's really going on in the industry. So that helped me organize my thoughts and create tangible goals for myself with focus. in the beginning.
Live sound studio, which of those did you get your first breaks in?
Live sound.
How did that come about?
Through Dana, she sent out an email, and I ended up going out and, well, the first email I got was working with this master of classical immersive and opera recording, David Bowles here, who is the vice president of the West Coast AES. He's quite well known, and I got on. It was a video shoot for the California Symphony, and he got double booked, so he needed somebody to come in and run his rig. So that was live recording, so that was intimidating, but also a lot of fun. And then the next thing, an email went out from Dana and said, "Hey, they're opening up this place called Club Fugazi in this historic San Francisco venue where there was this show called Beach Blanket Babylon that was there for 40 years. That the street's even named after that. That closed, and there's a new team in there, and they do like this kind of like cool kind of edgy circus in there, like kind of Cirque du Soleil on a very small scale. So I just went there knowing nothing, and I ended up helping install the sound system. And through that process, I met their A1, is this guy Federico Tezon, and he took to me, and I ended up being his A1 sub at that venue, just because he just responded to just my passion and curiosity and work ethic. And so he mentored me, and I started doing that show as his sub. Was my first gig, was A1, and it's a scary gig because you got to get all the cues right with all the athletes and gymnastics, and then I had a classmate, Shannon Craig, who's the lead tech here at August Hall, which is like 1,000-seat, 2-level venue that has great bands, a beautiful venue, beautiful DMB system with Digicos. And then he's like, "Come on in, just push amps, and then we'll train you on monitors." So as a 45, I was pushing amps for whatever, an hour, not what the audio engineers made, hanging out with people half my age, and just killing it as a stagehand. And then within a few months that they taught me, and then I was doing audio. And actually, the first time I did live sound in a rock club was on the SD9 at August Hall. That's how I learned. And to be fair, like there was a vacuum that was created in COVID that never would have existed. Those kind of jobs would have taken 5 years of grinding it out at small local clubs to get an opportunity to do that. So there was a vacuum that COVID created that allowed me to kind of like get into these roles much quicker than I would have had otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where I started in live sound. And through all of that and making relationships and connecting with Federico specifically, he's friends with all the Hyde Street guys and is in a band with the Hyde Street Studios manager, Jack Crispin, called Idle Hands, and they're old buddies. And he brought me to the holiday party, and I met Will Chason, who's the chief engineer at Hyde Street. And I just asked him, how do people get internships here? And then he's like, just here's my number, here's my email, hit us up. So that's how live sound translated into the studio. And then I worked live sound to pay the bills for a lot of years. It taught me a lot, and I like the camaraderie of it. And it's good work. You can get in with everybody, and it's a little bit more, it's a really good place to start when you're starting out, because getting going in the studio takes quite a long time. Building clientele, learning as an A2, as an intern. The studio road takes a lot longer to be able to pay your rent off. So the skills and stuff you're going to learn in live sound is invaluable, and it'll get you working in audio a lot faster. So,
in your experience, why do you think live sound has helped you pay the bills easier?
The reality of the studio game is, especially now where there's less of them because there's so much more accessibility to like home recording and people recording themselves. The big studios, especially with Pro Tools and not needing tape operators, you need less people to run a session. A lot of these sessions are run by one person and an intern, or one person and maybe an A2, even at the big rooms, unless it's a really big session and they bring in some more people. Where 25th Street's a good example of that's a big room where you can easily get like a 20-piece orchestra in there, and that would require obviously more people than one. But I guess the point I'm trying to make is there's a hierarchy that exists in terms of getting the work in the studio if you want to be like a house engineer. And the only way to get there, other than learning everything, is attrition. So you have to wait for people to move on. And sometimes people don't move on for 10 years. where live sound, there's more opportunity to work right away. That being said, especially with the studio game, there's very rarely are you going to have an opportunity where just one studio is going to be able to give you enough work to support yourself. So what starts to happen, especially when you're a young producer engineer, is you realize, hey, the only way I'm going to be doing this full time is if I'm out there hustling and I'm developing relationships with bands, and then I'm bringing the bands in and booking them myself. So client acquisition, I think, is very high priority and a key to being able to like pay your bills in the studio, because you're not going to get it from just one studio. Very rarely does that happen. And the people that have that aren't going to go anywhere because that's what they're doing, unless they move.
Yeah. You know, in terms of the sheer amount of live gigs happening on a constant basis across multiple venues and the need for live sound people. And as you say, the COVID vacuum type situation occurred. So it allows for rapid fire, like, well, here's a couple $100, here's $300, here's another $100, like you can compile the money to pay the bills quite rapidly.
Yeah, you just got to start out, just be willing to just kind of start out pushing amps at a few venues, and then they show you the ropes, and then you grind it out some local clubs. Yeah, it's just really, for that scene, it's really about this, just like everything else, it's about networking. And then if you have a nice personality and you work hard to build relationships with people, then as you start at one venue, this is how it works in live sound. If people don't know, it's the same people around town at all the same venues. So a lot of audio engineers will be on like 5 to 7 venue rosters, and then one night you're at this club, and the next night you're at that club, and the next night you're at that club. But it's all the same pool of engineers working at all these clubs, mostly in live sound. So it's still somewhat of a small pool. So if you build a relationship with those engineers and the club owners, they'll recommend you for the other clubs they work at. So just do really good job at one, get to know, and then spend the time investing and getting to know people. And then that'll be a domino effect. And then once your name gets around town, then you'll be working full time.
And also the ability to get along with the other engineers is key.
Yeah, you want to get along with everybody. You just want to be professional. It's really important how the bands react to you and how the staff reacts to you, especially at the smaller clubs. Being the grumpy sound man would have got me nowhere. Yeah, you make the bands feel good because the bands will tell the promoter and the show manager. So they get that feedback like, oh, the bands like them, the land's like her, or whatever, And then, yeah, you have to build a reputation, and you need to build it quickly.
Could you articulate what you think let's just talk about the relationship with the bands that are coming through. If we were to put it into words, what are we talking about getting along? What are the things that make a band really like you?
Competency in the job without being a bully. Without being a bully, that's just number one. Coming in with a very nice attitude, a humble attitude, but at the same time, you need to hold yourself like that you're in control of the entire situation at all times. And that's something I learned in bartending, where things can really fall apart really quick on a Saturday night behind the bar when you're by yourself. As soon as you put your head down and people can notice that you're not paying attention, then it's just like a domino effect. Like one person turns on you, the next person turns, and now all of a sudden you're at war with the rooms. Like seriously, like if the clientele will then be running the room instead of you running the room. So as a bartender, your presence has to be like, I'm in control. I got you. You're next. No problem. I got you. Then everybody kind of settles down. They get patient. They're like, somebody's in control of this room. There's focus. I know where I'm at in line. They're aware of me, and they're in control. It's going to take some time. It's busy. And then everybody kind of settles down, and then you get a higher level of higher tolerance and patience for when it's their turn. Mm-hmm. Very much the same thing in live sound. If you're focused, eye contact, you know what you're doing, you're in control of your environment, you communicate, the band feels more comfortable, they're more relaxed, they start to become patient, and then that initial, because sound checks, they're rapid fire. You're doing 4 bands on a Saturday night by yourself at like Rickshaw Stop, for example, which is a great club here in San Francisco. If you're not in control, the bands are going to get frustrated, and then they're going to turn on you, which I luckily haven't had that experience personally, but that's the number one way, I think, to start building a relationship with the band and the trust you is just being professional, being in control, and being pleasant and being humble, but not to the point of not being strong and doing your thing. That's the first step. And you have to build that trust like almost immediately with bands. And usually it's the look in the eye, the handshake. Hey, here's the plan for tonight. I mean, at least that's what works for me. Even the way you wrap your cables, I feel like like clean cable lines, not scattered, not jittery, the efficient, proactive sense of urgency, but in control and still calm. They see that, they love that. And just be nice.
And they feel taken care of. They feel like, oh, okay, nice guy in charge, knows what the hell he's doing. And they that confidence that they start to associate with you really starts to permeate. Like if you sell one member, it starts to permeate throughout the band, because drummer sees how the lead singer is being dealt with. They're not going to feel intimidated. They're going to feel taken care of.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like phrases like, hey, I'll get whatever you need, man. This is your show. Like, I got you. Or hey, I have a problem with that monitor. It's starting to just give me a few minutes with that monitor. But
problem solving.
Lots of problem solving and lots of proactive communication and just being 100% present. There's like an extra 10% you can give that they don't always get. Mm-hmm. And it's that love factor, that extra, like, I'm here, I like you, I'm here to support you, that direct eye contact, let them feel the love. That's that extra 10% that's really going to separate you from a lot of people.
No, let's take it out of the live environment into the studio environment. What's the approach there for you? How have you been successful there? Because my time of knowing you, you've moved rather fast. You've been making it work. So what's the strategy?
It's the same thing. Let them feel the love, proactive communication. It starts with the emails, positive, present emails, if that makes sense, the tone of your email, but combined with professionalism. And then as soon as they come in the studio, I'm like, shake their hands, look them in the eyes, welcome them, show them around. I show them the bathrooms and the kitchen first, make sure the kitchen's clean, offer some coffee, some tea. Let's just get started, and then give them an explanation of the flow of the whole day, set the expectations correctly, all while bringing like a warm, loving presence. I think it's basically the same thing. Just you don't have to worry about feedback or like an audience. So, I think they're very similar. Because the work ethic and the strategy is going to be the same either way. You want the talent to feel comfortable. You want the talent to feel supported. You want the talent to know that you're in control and they trust you, that you have their best interests in mind. And it's not about you. It's about the success, their event being successful or whatever they need to do. So when they see that you're thinking holistically and just there to support them and make them hopefully better than they'd be without you. I hope that doesn't sound cocky, but when they start, then they get excited and things hold together well and you get good results.
Yeah. It's always great to get texts or emails or phone calls after the session too. Hey man, we had a great time. We got 10 more songs. We want to come back.
Yeah.
That's when you've done well. Let's talk business. Let's talk about money management. Your previous, whether they be small jobs, big jobs, whatever, prior to audio, have you noticed any great differences in past careers versus audio and how you deal with it financially?
Oh, absolutely. It's complete freelance when you're in the studio, unless you're the rare person that has a house. You're the number one or the number two, or number one and have a house gig, so you're the first call on everybody at the studio. Balancing out freelance, especially if you want to be a studio person, requires a lot of thought and a lot of hustle. So you're always generating your revenue through networking and communication and word of mouth. I'm fortunate enough to be enough studios that I get cold calls from studios, which means, if you don't know, that's when just a client that doesn't have a relationship with the studio calls in, wants to book the studio, so you get the gig as a house engineer. And then that's another way to build clientele also. But there's also a learning curve to it that's kind of steep, because there are rhythms in the studio world annually, as there are in live sound. For example, if you're doing live sound, typically summertime, unless you're going to go out and do festivals, is the slow period, usually January, the first couple of weeks of February, slow period. So you're talking about 12 weeks on average where you might only get like 3 gigs a month. So how do you plan ahead with your finances for that? How much are you saving for those periods. Feast or famine sometimes in the studio. Like I had wrapped up 3 or 4 projects simultaneously going into NAMM this year, and then coming out of it having like one record I'm focused on. So then I'm now every night I'm at every show that I can be at right now. I'm trying building up, and I have projects pending that but sometimes those projects are like a year or 2 of networking and building relationships before they're ready to come around and do a full length or an EP. So I have projects like scattered throughout this year coming up, but I'm not working on 4 bands currently, so I'm out every night. So there's every show, trying to hang out more with people, get on networking events when I have time. So constantly generating business to create revenue. And if you don't like that part of it, then that's the wrong game for you, because that's how you're going to make your money, and that's how you're going to get things going. It's client networking. And the more you do it and the better you are at it, the more likelihood for success in the recording producing world I think you're going to have.
Do you try to supplement your income with any other things outside of audio?
So I do have one little side hustle. I have a senior I take care of like once a week that pay really well. So that's actually a big part of the learning curve that I'm dealing with right now. Is I'm not a Grammy award winning LA, New York, Nashville producer, right? I'm slightly above ground level, I guess, in terms of if you use metrics like Grammys and producing credits and licensing revenue and all that stuff. I'm still ground zero, like pretty lower on the food chain with that. But I'm making a lot of local records, and I'm working a lot in the studio, so I'm constantly working. I just haven't really leveled up to that point. So through that process, that's still not enough revenue to live in San Francisco. I'm actively trying to think creatively for generating other revenue streams besides just the studio alone. And it seems like a lot of cats have some kind of side hustle, unless you're really, really at the top of the game, because there's just not enough money in it unless you're working like 5 days a week, 6 days. I mean, maybe that's my experience, and it's hard to always fill your book up, your calendar up 5 days a week with just recording and producing. I'll get there. I'm on the road to getting there, but it's not always there. So I'm trying to think of a new side hustle and other ways to generate revenue. I think it's really important. And then there's the diversifying your portfolio attitude, meaning that like COVID, I didn't have to go through COVID as a freelance engineer producer, so I didn't feel the things that everybody else felt. I watched my friends do it that are professional producers and musicians and go through all that. I was W-2 forever, so I had CARES Act, and then I had unemployment, and I had all that stuff. So I was very well taken care of during COVID. I was very fortunate, and a lot of people weren't. So there's looming, not to be a bummer, but there's a looming recession right now. The economics are very, and the economy in America is very uncertain. And that gets me thinking like, oh, well, could that trickle down to people? It does trickle down to people going out to dinner and consumer shopping. How does that trickle down to studio services and people having money to book studio time? I work with a lot of bands that, they're bartenders, baristas, work at record shops. So if sales decline, people lose jobs, people don't get as much tips. That's obviously going to affect a lot of my work. So this is kind of like the first window into economic uncertainty that I've dealt with as a freelance engineer, which makes me think even more like, oh, what are the other things I could do outside of the audio industry that might help kind of offset when times are slow?
Definitely, we are in some new territory. Lots of shakiness, not only on Wall Street, but everywhere. Have you noticed any kind of changes in the live world? Have you started to see a downturn in touring bands?
That's a good question. I should be clear. The only time I really do live sound anymore, other than like once in a while at Rickshaw Stop, is when bands hire me to come mix them. So I'm not in the middle of the live sound scene the way I used to be. So I really don't have a good answer for that. Also, it's just the slower time of year. It's February, so but there's lots of shows going on. I haven't seen any less shows, but I wouldn't be the cat to know the answer to that right now.
February's over, my friend. We're in
oh
March.
My God, you're right. It's like mid-March. So I guess that's why there's so many concerts going on right now.
What the hell is going on? The months
right.
are just flying by.
February, anyway. It looks like February outside here in San Francisco. Matt, you left at a good time. It's really rainy and gray right now. So
Oh, crap. Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
It's not like that down here in New Mexico right now. You mentioned when you were bartending, there's a lot of faux pas you made, a lot of mistakes you made there at the bar, saying the wrong thing, doing the wrong thing. Have you found that in the world of audio? Are you going through that period at all, or have you gone through that period of doing and saying the wrong thing?
mostly not. Thank God. I was the kid that burned my hand and then never tried to never do it again twice. But socially, or at least always trying to self improve myself. I think that when you come into the game with enough life experience and a lot of customer service experience, there's less likelihood for that to happen. But also, I have a acute awareness of what the artists are going through, both in live and studio sound, because I was one for so long. Um, and I'm just much more mature than I was in my 20s and 30s. So I don't feel like I've encountered that too much. I will say, if you overproduce, you can create insecurity in people. And as a result of that insecurity, you can sometimes not get a call back or not get the best performance. So there is a learning curve in terms of like how to get the best out of people and learn, for me anyways, and learning the rhythm and the flow of a session and dealing with the different personalities and what's going to motivate someone emotionally and what's going to motivate it, what kind of structure does one artist needs as opposed to different artists needs. That's something you got to learn in real time. But luckily, not like offending people or pissing people off. I have enough tact and maturity and professionalism to avoid that. And I say to a lot of people, they're like, "Oh, well, you're moving, like you said, you're moving fast. You're going up the ranks quick." It's just because I was able to learn from a lot of old mistakes and just apply those philosophies and lessons to this career. So it's like I already figured out how to be successful in one field in the industry, but that was through a lot of hard knocks and a lot of growing up. So I just apply a lot of what I learned there to this. And so fortunately, I haven't run into too much trouble with any of that stuff.
Do you see that it's in your best interest to stay in the Bay Area, or do you see that moving to LA or to Nashville has any part in your future?
Currently, it's still better for me to be in an undervalued market with the potential for growth than to go into an inflated, highly competitive market. I think there's a lot of local talent that's fantastic in the Bay Area, especially coming out of the East Bay, that I had a lot of exposure to when I was doing live sound. I was like really surprised at how much or how good a lot of these bands were because I was ignorant of the local music scene. There's also whispers of a lot of people in LA wanting to come up to the Bay just because they're kind of over the LA scene, which I've already started to see manifest here. Like they reopened up the record plant. It's 2,200 studios. So they're kind of working on a destination spot. I've talked destination studio where people obviously will come and travel and stay for a couple of weeks in San Francisco and record. People that are kind of sick of the LA studios. I've had LA engineers and studio owners contact me to say they want to start moving up to the Bay. Maybe I'd have more opportunity for consistent studio work if I was in LA and Nashville, and I have more access to a lot of focused risk-taking bands. Like a lot of people move to those towns, they're taking big risks, and they're really a lot of them are laser focused. Let's just put it this way. I just think being in an undervalued market, I know it's a smaller market, will give you the opportunity for growth. And I want to build that here in San Francisco and grow with it. Long term, I'm open to maybe being around Nashville, LA, or New York again. But the benefit of San Francisco is LA is only a 6-hour drive away. And I've drive down to LA and recorded bands there as well. So you can have the best of both worlds. But no, I'm not interested in moving out of San Francisco. I'm really interested in continuing to build community here and work with talent here.
Well, we have a great community in the Bay Area.
Amen to that. Yeah.
I'm just thrilled with where things are at the moment, and I only see it growing. Well, excellent. So for the audience, website is casenewcomb.com, NEWCOMB.com. I'll put that in there. You don't have to remember that if you just want to go to workingclassaudio.com. I'm really thrilled to have you on. I'm so glad that you could make time for me, and I'm excited to see where you go, because as I saw you enter into it, I don't know, something in my brain was like, That dude's headed somewhere.
Oh, thank you so much. It's such a competitive, difficult industry to navigate and figure out. Like, you know, everybody in the industry. Like, I go to NAM and you're like hanging out with everybody, you know. And so to hear that from someone of your status in the industry encourages me to keep fighting and working harder and keep going in this industry, because it can be very daunting to continue at times because it's difficult and competitive. So that's really encouraging. Thank you so much.
Oh no, man. I mean, I think you're doing great, and I'm super excited to watch it happen. It's gives me a thrill to see uh, somebody take charge of their situation like that, because it's inspiring to me, and it also gives me ideas for myself, to be honest with you. So
Awesome. Let's talk
you're
about some
kick.
side hustle ideas.
That's right.
let's,
We're gonna open
let's
a nursing
let's
home,
build
right?
opportunity together. What's that? What did you say?
We're gonna open up a nursing home
I guess the only
for.
promotion thing I wanted to, you said the website, thank you very much, casenewcomb.com. I'm mostly active on Instagram. That's at Case Newcomb, CaseNewcomb. You can always DM me on Instagram or email me
I'll
through
put a
my
link in.
website.
I'll put a link for
Thanks.
that as well.
Yeah. And from a personal, I want to say, like, I became exposed to working class audio at City College. Dana, it's part of the program. To And I remember just thinking, cool, like, okay, that's legit. And the more I became aware of the industry and what working class audio is, and the exposure it gives to people and that aren't, or that are aspiring in the industry and learning, and the amount of knowledge that can be gained here is fantastic. So for me, it's a huge personal benchmark to now be on your show and be invited to be on your show. It's something I take a lot of pride in, and I feel very grateful to be a part of, because I started, I learned about your show and listened to your show when I was in school, and I had no idea who you were. I didn't even know you lived in San Francisco at the time. So to come that far already, to me, it's just really, really tickles my little boy heart. I'm very happy to be here. Thank you.
Thanks again, Case. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All
I
right.
had a great time.
Take care.